So could you tell us a little about your background and upbringing and how it has influenced your career path?
Sure, of course. So I was born in Pakistan. So I was born near Carrier, and I came to the UK with my mother, father, two brothers and a sister, and we came in 1967. So I was under a year old. So all my education, everything has been in the UK. But my parents, who were teachers in Pakistan, for them, the Pakistani culture was very important. So I have this sort of hybrid life where I have the whole sort of I enjoy everything in the UK, but also we have this heritage which is Pakistan, and we go back frequently. And interestingly, my mother passed away in 2019. I go back regularly, so actually I have a real affinity with Pakistan. In fact, I'm going next week. Mm-hmm. But so for me, the two are hand in hand. And I think it's important to have some kind of cultural basis to yourself. You've got to know where you belong. You've got to know where you come from. Otherwise, I think it's easy to lose yourself. It's very exciting here, so it's very easy to lose yourself and actually assume a personality that isn't genuinely yours. So I think one of the things that's very important, I think, in people's careers is authenticity. So, if you look at people, how they go through their careers and how it's helped me, is I think you have to be authentic to who you are. So I bring a lot of my personality. I bring a lot of my heritage. When I speak to some of my siblings, I'll be speaking in Punjabi or Urdu on the phone. In the office. We have a prayer room here. We do Jummahs here. So we have the whole Pakistani, Islamic, and UK aspect to us, I would say, and all three are important.
Were there any particular role models or mentors who inspired you to pursue your career path?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very, very fortunate. I think I've been very well guided, supported, coached by a lot of people. And I have this sort of ability to sort of shimmy up to people and sort of get them to adopt me in some form or shape, although they won't realize they're doing it. And I just get so much coaching and support. So, for example, I mean, last week, one of our previous chairmen of PWC, I just gave him a call. He'd been retired 8 years. I needed some help with something, and I just gave him a call. He picked her up. We had a really nice conversation. So for me, if you were to say, can I name individuals, there's just too many, right? So I'm always, I guess I have two things. I have a thirst for knowledge, so I'm always interested in learning new things. And the second thing is I'm always looking to get help from other people, And I think if you look at leadership, what are the characteristics of leadership? I think there's three fundamental characteristics of leadership. One, I think you've got to have listening skills. Two, I think you've got to be able to get a good team around you. And that team, if they're better than you, so much the better, right? And the third thing is I think you've got to have humility and you've got to manage your own ego, right? Because when you're there as a leader, you're actually there as a leader of other people. You're not there to lead yourself in that sense. So all of these things I've learned from other people. I wasn't, I didn't, fetch up here after university or a job. So loads of people. And I've always looked up to people. I've always found people to look up to. And I still do.
And then what inspired you to pursue a career in the field of finance and consultancy after gaining a degree in nuclear engineering and actuarial sciences?
So I was always interested in, it's interesting. I remember Pakistan having some very good nuclear physicists. I remember that when I was growing up, right? And it just seemed like a degree where I could use my maths, I could do my engineering, and actually I could become a nuclear engineer. I then actually graduated as a nuclear engineer, and I got a job with a company called Babcock and Wilcox, and they used to make Trident submarines and Harpoon missile systems and stuff like that, right? I mean, I only did a very little bit of it. When I say that, I probably did something almost minuscule. But so I started a graduate training course there, and after 2 years I was going to be an engineer, a chartered engineer. But then I had this really funny epiphany, and my mum was really anti this, right? But I'll tell you why. So then I decided, I like engineering, but I don't want to be my boss's boss in 10 years' time. Never mind in 2 years' time. I just, when I looked forward, maybe it comes back to your point, I wasn't seeing a career and I wasn't seeing the role models I wanted to see. And also I didn't feel challenged, pushed, So for me, it was Where can I, and also, I didn't have the best of degrees. My brothers, they've got much better degrees than me, right? So there was a little bit of, can you go into a profession which is hard, you have to prove yourself, and actually you come out of it with a professional qualification. That's what I wanted. So I looked at lots of careers. I looked at accountancy, I looked at tax, but actuarial seemed to be the one that everybody was saying was very, very tough. Secondly, it was reasonably well respected. And the third thing is, some professions you have to be very good at math. Some professions you just have to be good at them. And in actuarial, you have to be very good. And then as a nuclear physicist, I was good at math. So I wanted to go into the thing that would play to my strengths. So, and I loved it. I mean, it took me a very long time to qualify. And I went back to university. I went to City University to do a conversion course into actuarial, a postgraduate. And my mum hated it because she said, you've got a nice job, you're an engineer, Asians love engineers. And what's all this actuarial business? So it was a risk. I've never regretted it one moment because I have a real passion for my job. Ironically, I do very little actuarial work now, if any. It's more of a leadership role. But that career has sustained me for over 30 years. And my advice to anybody would be, if you can get a professional qualification, it's something no one will be able to take away from you, and it will make you different. And there are my nephew's doing Chartered Insurance Institute, my daughter's doing the CFA exams. There's lots of different professional exams, and I think it makes someone stand out. If you want a job like everyone else, do what everybody else is doing. But if you want to stand out and you want to be different, you have to combine things, right? So I combine my actuarial with my MBA, right? Not many actuaries have MBAs. You see what I mean? So all of a sudden I was different. And I could go into boardrooms and I could have conversations beyond, the technical mathematics of the balance sheet. I could have conversations on HR, on strategic transformation, on marketing. All of a sudden I could have, was it Wittgenstein who says, the limits of my language are the limits of my world, right? My language became bigger. When I went into actuarial, my language went from here to here. Then when I did my MBA, it went from here to here. And then when I joined Lloyd's of London, it went from here to here. And then when I went back to it came to PWC. So for me, it's always, you've got to increase your vocabulary, your knowledge, your experience. And I would say language is a metaphor for your experience and what you bring. So for me, it was always about combining things that make you unique. Yeah. So if you're an accountant and you add this skill to it, there's, 1 million accountants, let's say. I'm sure there aren't, right? But, there's a lot of accountants. But if you want to stand out, you've got to do something a bit different. And you've got to be able to have a conversation other people can't have. So there's always this sort of thirst for knowledge, thirst for mentors, and a thirst for education. But there comes a point where education stops. You no longer are being educated in the classical sense. You have to then educate yourself. And that's through life experiences.
Could you share some key milestones and experiences that have shaped your journey? Anyone that you can think in particular? Or?
I think it's interesting. What a great question. And the reason I paused was because you can look back on a milestone and sort of say that was a milestone, but at the time you probably don't think it was a milestone, right? But I tell you, there's one characteristic that all my milestones have, is they have risk associated with them. There are no milestones without any risk. So wherever I've taken a risk, and sometimes it doesn't come off, sometimes it does work out, but wherever I've taken a risk, that then turns itself into a milestone. So when I took a risk in my career change, when I took a risk to come to PwC, when I took a risk to do an MBA, when I took I've taken so many different risks. In hindsight, they were all milestones, but at the time, they were risks, right? So it's interesting. I would almost, if I look through the lens of a milestone, where do I end up? I end up having taken a risk at a certain point in my career. So I've got loads of them because I just think that's through risk you get learning experience, and then through those you get milestones. Some of my toughest situations have involved people. They haven't involved profit or business or strategy or product. HR. They've actually involved leading people in a way that actually people want to be led by you. So that some of my, earlier days, I had this sort of picture of what leadership was and how to, guide a business. But it's totally different to how it is now. What I think now is totally different to what I used to think 20 years ago, you know. And that's because I've had all these milestones, or these, you know, taking leadership roles and taking risk with them. And some of the time, I've not done them very well at all, you know, really badly. But I've learned from those, from taking that risk, and then it turns into a milestone. And now when I think back, I think, God, if that thing hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't be able to deal with this situation now, or I wouldn't be able to lead these people now.
Your passion for poetry and literature is quite unique. How did your exposure to these arts contribute to your personal and professional development? Like we were discussing your name, for example.
You know, it's interesting. I think people like to know who you are. You know, if you're going to lead someone, or if you're going to be involved in a business, people want to know who you are and what you stand for, right? They need to know your background. You need to know, you know, your interests. They need to know something about your family. You know, whatever it is, right? And so for me, I think I started getting to poetry when I was at university. You know, in my early 20s. And I remember I went to a second-hand bookshop, and it was in Bristol because I'd got my first actuarial job in Bristol. And there was a book there called Palgrave's Golden Treasury. It was a really old, battered book, and there's a new version of it as well now, but this was like the original, I don't know, God knows, 1800s or whatever it was from. And I just remember going through that and just loving it, and it just captured moments, and it captured thinking. I mean, I'm not a poet myself, right? But I just enjoy when people capture something. They almost capture a painting, they capture an emotion. So that's how I kind of got into poetry. And as you know, people in the early 20s, they have lots of emotions, right? So it just captured a lot of that. And then over time, I love the human voice. So then I got into, you know, Qawwali, and you know, my wedding, I brought over the Sabri brothers. So they sang at my wedding. There was only one brother at the time, and so everybody thought I was a bit mad, and I was like 29, and I think, what's, you know. But I always love what people do, their creativity. One of my roles now is I'm the chair of the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester, and it's so brilliant watching, you know, the artists putting things together, the sound checks, the dress rehearsals, and then obviously you've got the business which you are running with. So that sort of is something that I'm genuinely passionate about and interested, and I've been for many years. But also when I share those experiences, people get to know me. You know, so I'm very open about that.
Diversity and inclusion are significant topics in today's corporate world. How do you prioritize these values in your leadership roles?
I mean, this is such a big topic, and it's such an important topic. So I'll come back to your very first question, which is role models, right? So fundamentally, we need people who are comfortable in their own skin, who are comfortable with what they stand for, and they're comfortable sharing it. And then you become some kind of role model, right? So we have 26,000 staff, you know, in PwC, and you know, we have lots of different diversity and lots of different hires, and we focus on that. But fundamentally, I think people need to see role models. They need to see people in senior positions, which are some version of themselves, right? And so it's diversity, but so we can hire people, but if they don't see role models ahead of them, or they don't feel welcome with their personal characteristics, i.e. if you join PwC and you come from a particular background, and then you think, actually, I need to turn into something else to be successful, then that's failed the whole point of it, right? So your point around inclusion is really, really important. So for me, I think it's really important for, you know, where, you know, with the blessings of God, we've done well in our career. I think there's a role for us to encourage other people to join organizations like, let's say, PwC or other professional organizations. I think there's an obligation to share our journey, and maybe some people will get something out of it, and maybe some people won't. But the point is that we are making it available, and you know, I think there's This is interesting. So one of the things I find, if we go back to Pakistanis, right, one of the things I find interesting is how people are balancing their cultural identity with their faith identity and with their UK identity. You know, how do you combine those three? And how do you combine them in a way that actually is really authentic to you and you enjoy it and it creates fun, but actually it's something that is a differentiator for you, right? So one of the things I often say is, right, you know, the way I think about it is we are three-dimensional, right? So we have our Pakistani culture, whether it's the qwalis, whether it's amazing food, whether it's the amazing dresses that we have and clothes you know, we have in our community, the mendis, so we have this amazing, you know, this just something amazing way of culturally, you know, existing as a family and as a community. And we have lots of great celebrations, you know, we've got Eid coming up, right? So there's some amazing stuff. So we need to take the best of that, right? And then if you look at the Islamic identity, that gives us a lot of comfort. It's a form of meditation. It's a form of grounding. It lets us connect with something bigger than ourselves, you know, and you know, the Islamic faith is very big. You know, I often think the amount we learn of it is minuscule, and the journey of learning and teaching is lifelong. And so I think people can take the best out of that, right? And the third thing is, I mean, it is amazing. You know, if you were talking to me about my career, I have been supported in the UK throughout my whole career, throughout my education, by financing, by support. You know, so there's a great, it's a great climate environment, and we have so much freedom here, right, to do the things we want to do, right? And there's fish and chips, right? You know, so there's lots of stuff. So my advice to people is we're three-dimensional. So when you think about it from a diversity perspective, bring all three dimensions with you and bring them all. And how you synthesize them is up to you, right? But I find that if, you know, personally, if I'm unbalanced across them, if I give too much weight to one versus the other, I get unbalanced, you know. So for me, and I feel really privileged to have access to all three parts of it. When I was younger, I used to be slightly quieter around my Pakistani heritage. You know, I'm not like that anymore at all. I'm very, very happy and excited about it. I would probably think my sort of religious context, I'd probably put that on the back burner, but I'm not there now. You know, so for example, everybody knows not to, you know, put meetings in my diary on a Friday between 12 and 2. You know, they'll know, you know, I fast in the fasting seasons. And I don't do that because I want people to know I do it. I want people to know because that is part of who I am, and the people who come after me, it will be a part of them. You know, I suspect I'm in a position where I can sort of say it without, you know, any reverberations. But I want other people to sort of have the confidence and the comfort that, you know, I want to make sure I've sort of set the path so that when people say that, you know, when I don't turn up to a meeting at 12 o'clock on a Friday, it won't be a problem for someone else either in the future. So that's how I think about it. But I think it's a real, it's amazing, you know, and I think to have our background, to have our opportunities in this country, I think we're blessed.
So this falls quite well into our next question, that how do you navigate your intersectionality of your British and Pakistani identities in your professional and personal life?
I don't do anything, I mean, I don't do anything to navigate it in the strictest sense. All I do is I display it. That's all I do, right? So I go to Pakistan twice a year. I go in spring and I go in autumn. I can cope with that, right? Everybody knows I go, right? So it's visible. Everybody knows that's my heritage, you know? And so I'm less navigating, I'm more just, I'm going to be careful, I don't keep using the word authentic. I think the most important thing is I portray the things that I'm passionate about. And, you know, Pakistani is one of those things that I'm passionate about.
In what ways do you engage with the British Pakistani community to support and empower the next generation of leaders?
Mm-hmm. I mean, so you can do it in two ways, right? You can have a profile which does it, or you just quietly get on with it. And I think part of our training at PWC, we tend to do things a bit quieter. You know, we help where we can, and it's interesting. I found I found there's subtle things a person can do that can really help future generations. And some of that is broad, where we will sponsor something, right? And this year we sponsored Yorkshire Yaya Awards in Yorkshire, right? Which was about Asian achievers, right? Now that's big and it's a bit snazzy and there's a dinner and all the rest of it. And then there's other small things, which is you're coaching staff, you're talking to people outside of the firm, you're helping people in your community. And I think it's a balance. You know, different stages in your life, you can do different things. One thing I find interesting is I want, you know, I wish people were more comfortable and more confident in themselves, you know, to just go and make stuff happen. Right, take more risks. You know, I wish people didn't carry their diversity with them all the time. You know, I wish, and you could say, well, Armie, that's all very well you saying that now where you are, but I think there's something about taking risk and doing stuff that you're passionate about, and the rest kind of takes care of itself. You know. I probably haven't articulated that very well, so I'm sorry.
No, it's really good. Thank you very much. But looking forward, what do you hope to achieve in terms of promoting understanding and appreciation of Pakistani culture and contributing within the UK business landscape?
Well, you know, it's really interesting. I was on holiday recently, and I was in a hotel and with my wife and kids, and around the pool we were sat there, and there were some English people, Pakistanis, next to us in the pool, and they were like starting their journey. They were like 20, 21, and I'm like, you know, towards the end of my career journey, and I was trying to put myself in their shoes, and I was sort of thinking, you know, what did I feel like when I was there? And I was thinking, oh my God, they've got a whole 35, 40 years ahead of them. They have no idea, you know. So I think I haven't got a plan for the question you've asked me rather, sorry. So I don't have a plan, right? I just know something will unravel, something will reveal itself. And I think, you know, I feel very blessed. You know, brought up by a single mother. My father died when we were very young. And, you know, I feel very blessed to have had, you know, my mother's prayers, like a little protection blanket all around me through my life, right? And through that, I've had lots of opportunities. So I think something will turn up. I don't know what it is. I'm not looking for it. I'm not out there, you know, inconsolable, you know, saying, what am I going to do? It's just not the stage. So I think something good will happen. I have some ideas. And they may be the wrong ideas. But I think something good will happen. And I'm looking forward to the adventure that will create. And some of that may be in Pakistan or it may be here. I don't know.
Could you share any advice or insights for aspiring professionals, especially British Pakistanis, who aim to succeed in the corporate world?
Yeah, I get the privilege of talking to various communities, you know, here in my role. And the advice I would give people, I guess it's twofold, is one, do new things, do something you haven't done before, you know, explore things, build up a CV that isn't academic. You know, build up a CV of experiences, right? And that's the beauty about the UK is there's so many things you can do, right? And do the things you love. You know, for me, you know, there's lots of things I love doing, right? I won't list them off, but everybody can find their own list. And the danger is that the danger as a community is we focus on the things we already do. You know, we look in the mirror and see the back of our own heads, right? So I think there's something about expanding our language, you know, our non-academic CV, right? And that is what makes us interesting as people in a corporate environment. If you can talk about things, broader things, and you have interests and passions, you know, and you're on a journey of learning, you know, which is, you know, true of our faith as well, then I think you'll be more successful in a corporate environment, which is kind of an odd thing to say, which is sort of saying, do things which are not related to your career, for your career to be more, to enhance your career. So that would be the very first piece of advice. There's a poem, isn't there? There's a poem, The Path Least Trodden. You know, it's about, I'm sure it's really interesting. I was talking to one of my partners, and I said it's one of my all-time favorite poems, and he said he's got it on his study wall. And then when I was at LBS, there was a course there ran called Leading Strategic Transformations. And we walked into the seminar room, and the first thing the guy did, the lecturer, was to put this poem up. And this poem I originally read in Palgrave's Golden Treasury, in my early 20s. And basically it's about a guy who goes into a woods and he sees two paths. Might not be a guy, might be one of my girls. So a person who goes into a woods, and he or she sees two paths, and they have to decide which one to go down, right? And the person decides to go down the one which is less trodden, right? They don't know what they're going to find at the end of that path, but they know they're going to find something they can't see now, right? And you have to keep going down those paths which are less trodden or least trodden. The danger is we keep going down the paths which are well trodden, because then we know where we're going to end up, right? So that's what I meant. So, there's an element of taking risks. There's an element of doing new things. There's an element of building a CV, which isn't academic, and I think going down so my part, if someone was to summarize my career, it's summarized in that poem, right? Which is basically, I've always gone down the path least trodden, and I think it's enhanced my ability to progress corporately as well.
Thank you so much. We can talk to you for hours, but thank you so much for taking time out to speak to the British Pakistan Foundation, and our audiences will love this. But thank you very much. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.